Hello and welcome to the next lesson of our IRL live streaming course. This one is maybe my favorite. Today we're going to talk about the business of IRL live streaming. So we understand your format and the technology that it'll take in order to run, in order to actually have a live stream that you can show to user or viewers that fits the format and vision that you have for your stream. Now in this lesson, our goal is to figure out how to make that self-sustaining. And that's really the goal of this whole course is how do you create a self-sustaining professional quality IRL live stream. So this business lesson is very important. I also think that there are some things here, or some concepts that maybe a lot of people haven't really come in contact with about business and about how to manage your money. And that's why I'm excited to talk about it. I think it's not something that a lot of people talk about. So by the end of this lesson, you should understand these three terms: overhead, upfront costs, and amortization. Those are three very important terms, and we have a business model spreadsheet that we're going to fill out to help us understand what those things are and how to optimize each of them. What a BOM is, this is a bill of materials and why it's important. So that's the next thing we're gonna talk about is what the BOM is. We're gonna walk through a little bit of it together. We're gonna spend in the course of this entire, during the whole course, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at the BOM. What you buy is actually very important. So we have a bunch of videos about that. Today we're gonna be talking a little bit about it as it relates to our business model. We're going to talk about revenue targets. The whole goal of this is to create a self-sustaining stream, so you have to set some targets for yourself in order to achieve that. We're going to figure out what your target needs to be in order to get your stream self-sustaining. We're also going to talk about amortization and how long it's going to take for you to amortize your upfront costs. If you don't understand what that means yet, by the end of the course, you will understand what that means. And you should, by the end of this course, have some reasonable expectations for yourself about how much revenue you're going to be able to generate, how long it's going to take for you to start making money, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think one of the most exciting parts of this lesson is I'm actually going to go through my own revenue data so that you can learn from my experiences and be able to set some reasonable expectations for yourself and about your own stream. I also think that this is great because not a lot of streamers are out there just revealing their revenue numbers. It's pretty rare actually to get that kind of information, so I'm going to be able to show you my data from another streamer that's probably in a very similar situation to you, being on the smaller side streamer. So looking forward to that. All right, so we've got three terms that we wanted to define. We've got upfront costs, and overhead, and amortization. The first thing that I want to talk about is upfront costs, and we're going to do that by taking a look at our BOM, our bill of materials. So this is in Airtable here. We're not going to go into a ton of detail about the BOM yet. That's in a later lesson. But know that you will at some point be creating a copy of this Airtable base so that you can modify it and update it with your own information. So now might be a good time to do that, or you can just follow along with the link that I have and take a look at it. There's three tabs up here. We're not going to worry about the parts or the build line items tabs at this point. That'll come later in the course for you when you're understanding how to kind of manage all the pieces of your BOM. So for right now, we're going to focus just on this builds tab. And what this tab here has is basically all of the costs of all the items that you need to buy for your live stream kind of summarized into one column here. So that's price. This price column is your upfront cost. It is the sum of all the things that you need to buy, just one-time purchase, in order to get your live stream from not being able to stream to being able to stream. So that's going to be like your Bella box, it's going to be your camera, it's going to be your microphones. All the equipment that you need to buy becomes upfront costs. These are also, another way of saying this, a barrier to entry. This is the reason why not just anybody is live streaming, it's because of this $729 price tag. So this is a barrier to entry, it's an upfront cost, and it's something that you have to manage and plan for. Oops, sneak preview. So the BOM is a list of stuff that you need to estimate your profit, or estimate your upfront costs and overhead. Like I said, if you need to make changes, you can make a copy of that Airtable base. We're going to go through the process of making changes in a later video. The next thing that we want to talk about is overhead, and this is also tracked on the BOM, the bill of materials. There's a separate column here for monthly overhead based on what your data plans are. That's going to be your number one source of overhead. You have like a $25, $35 a month data plan, that's going to account for a lot of your overhead. But there's also a few other things. If we look at the live streaming architecture diagram real quick, you can see that like the BellaBox Cloud Remote and this ingest server, those are two things that have a monthly cost associated with them. I think together they're about $10 a month. That has been factored in on this BOM here. So the monthly overhead is just all the things that you need to pay for every month, no matter what. Regardless of whether or not you're streaming, you have to make those payments. A good analogy in just a sort of brick and mortar store type business is overhead is the rent that you're paying for the space that you're in. So if you have to pay $1,000 a month in rent, it doesn't matter if you flip your sign to open every day or not, you still have to pay that money. That's what makes it overhead. Paying employees, on the other hand, that is not an upfront cost either. That's a different kind of expense that we don't really have with live streaming. But you don't need to pay your employees if you don't open the store, obviously, unless you're asking them to work. So that would not be considered overhead. The overhead is the rent that you pay every month, whether or not you open your store. And in our case, it's data plans and it's SaaS products and things like that. Both of those here, like I said, tracked on the BOM for you to access. Cool, so let's scroll down here a bit. We're going to check out the business model. So this is the business model. If you just click on this link, you'll see it. And I highly recommend the first thing you do here is click File, do Save As, make a copy of this, make your own version. I'm going to be just going through this and doing some edits and tweaking it, or just kind of playing with different numbers while we're here. You won't be able to do that unless you make a copy of it, so just go ahead and make a copy of it. You will also be referencing this throughout the remainder of the course. So we have in the practice section where we have the lessons where we really give you the nitty-gritty detail on what to click and what to buy and all that stuff. We have a bunch of lessons that are about what to buy. And every time you're figuring out a little bit more what you need to buy, you want to come in here and update the business model so that it has accurate information to help you make decisions. That's ultimately the goal of this business model, is to help you make decisions. And the big one is figuring out how much money you need in the bank before you can start streaming. What are my costs actually going to be before I start to hit break even and before this hobby becomes self-sustaining? We're going to put a number on that to say we're going to hit self-sustaining by this date and it's going to be this amount of revenue. And we're going to be able to say that if I were generating some amount of revenue, I would be profitable by some other date. The other important thing that we're going to measure is how long it will take to amortize our upfront costs. So that is, and that's this last cell here. So let's work through the spreadsheet here and then we'll talk about amortization at the end, and we'll figure out where we're gonna get all these numbers from. All right, so you can see that this is broken down into 3 sections here. The first 3 sections, these numbers are numbers that you have to provide. So we're going to be walking through that right now. And then this last section here, these are projections. The model has formulas in it that calculate these numbers for you based on what you put in here. Also, none of this is an exact science. There's lots of simplification in here. That's how business models work. This is just to give you a kind of ballpark understanding of the finances of running a live stream. And you can always, of course, come back here and reference it in the future for more information. But the chances are that your format or your desires is going to be like a little bit of weirdness in terms of fitting it into this one standardized business model. So keep in mind that every format's a little bit different. Every way that you have to calculate costs is a little bit different. And this is just to give you kind of a starting point. All right, so the 2 easy ones, upfront costs and monthly overhead. These 2 cells, basically I just got the number from my BOM, my bill of materials. So if I'm buying the beginner IRL setup, this is all the white boxes in here that you need in order to stream. These are the required components. So if I were to add all of those up together, I would get $729.65. What I did here is I just rounded that up to 750. You do want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. That might not even be enough wiggle room because it's inevitable. You're going to buy a part you don't need. Something's going to go wrong. Something's going to break. I don't know. There's going to be barriers to you getting that first stream up and running. So probably just adding a little bit extra is a good idea. I rounded it up to 750 for myself. Then for monthly overhead, like I said, this is your data plans, your SaaS products, etc. This is also in the BOM in this column here. This number is a lot more concrete. It's a lot more, it's a lot simpler to calculate because there's fewer monthly overhead items in your bill of materials. It's also easier because these are contracts that you sign in some cases, or in all cases. And so it's more predictable, it's easier to see what's coming on. So in this case, we don't really need to round it up. We can just say it's $35 a month. So both of these just came straight from my bill of materials. As you update your bill of materials, just come in here and update the business model so that you can get your realistic expectations set. All right, going on to the format side of things, these are the expenses or kind of variables that are related specifically to your format of show. And I'm actually going to talk about bitrate first. We'll just put it up here because this is probably the one that's the least, that you have the least control over. I think just leaving this at 4,000 is a good idea. This is basically telling you how much data per second does your live stream consume. And this is really important only for selecting a mobile data plan. The number of hours that you stream multiplied by the bit rate that you're streaming in determines how many gigabytes of data you're going to use each month for your format, and that will dictate which kind of data plan you need to buy, which is then going to dictate your monthly overhead here. So the reason I'm calculating your data consumption is so that you can come up with a reasonable estimate for your own format's monthly overhead. All right, and then hours streamed per month, this is obviously pretty straightforward. If you don't want to buy expensive data plans, the best way to avoid that is to stream fewer hours. For me, I stream somewhere between 12 and 15 hours a month, so I threw 15 in here as being the maximum. I wanted to make sure I had some headroom. Oh, a note about bitrate is that this is the maximum possible bitrate that you could ever stream at based on how you have your Bella box configured. The reality is you're going to use less data than this most likely. In unstable network conditions, the Bella box is going to bump down that bit rate to make sure that no frames are dropped and instead the quality degrades gracefully, elegantly. And so this is an inexact science calculating how much data you're actually going to use, but a good point of reference for you when you're picking out your data plan. Great, and then the last one is not really related to the kind of data plan stuff that we've been talking about for your format, but this is another kind of overhead. And this overhead is specific to supporting your format, whatever format you have created for yourself that we outlined in the format section. That's what we're going to be thinking about here. What are your costs going to be? Do you stream eating stuff? Well, you're going to need to buy food. Do you stream quote unquote degen activities? Well, you're probably going to want to buy alcohol, which gets expensive pretty quickly. Are you going to travel? Well, you're going to want to put your travel budget on here. Do you do cosplay streaming? You might need to buy makeup or costumes. Definitely include those costs in your overhead. Running gag that if you run into people on your stream that are they just show up there, that these people are paid actors. So if you need to pay a lot of actors, then make sure that you also include that in your overhead here in your format costs. Basically, these two cells mean the same thing. It's just I broke them out into two separate pieces because this is really, this expense here is stuff that you need to do no matter what in order to have a functional stream. Whereas this stuff here is a little bit flexible based on your format. You might put your numbers into the business model here and find that you aren't going to generate enough profit off your stream, or you're not going to amortize your rig quickly enough, in which case you might want to try and figure out a way to bump down this cost here. Likewise, if you have a revenue target set and you're like, wow, I'm making a lot of money on the stream, maybe I can actually up the quality bar of my content by spending some more money on my format, then you would put that number in here. Okay, so once you have a good estimate, for me, my format costs me nothing. I pretty much just go to free places, parks, playgrounds, not playgrounds, parks. I just ride around the city of San Francisco, and I very rarely go buy food or alcohol or do any of like pay for travel or any of that, lodging. So that for me effectively is $0. Okay, next up is the projections section. And this is a place where we're gonna kind of do a little bit of voodoo magic. We don't really actually know any of these numbers. We're trying to look into the future. That's what a projection means. So we're gonna put some numbers in here that really are gonna feel kind of arbitrary for sure. But we're gonna base it on the best available information we have, which is the data that I have from my own stream. So this months to revenue cell here, this is trying to communicate how many months until you achieve break even, until you can cover the overhead for your stream. So in this case, how many months do I think it'll take of streaming at my format, at my schedule, to achieve $35 a month in revenue on average? In here, I put 6 months. This is actually based on my actual real revenue data. It did take me about 6 months to achieve break even. So you can just use that number if it feels like it makes sense for you. If you feel like there's a reason why you might be more or less months to revenue, then please go in here and tweak this, change it. It's going to affect some of the numbers down here, and you can kind of see that effect as we get into that section. Revenue per month, and this one is basically just kind of a shot in the dark. You can put in here what you hope your revenue is each month. And on Twitch, for me, this is like subscriptions, this is bits, subs, gift subs, bits, donations. Even for me, my live streaming course is a part of this revenue because I do promote it on my stream and I made it to support my stream. So I might include my actual live streaming course revenue in here. This number is not actually my revenue number, so just keep that in mind. But you got to come up with an estimate of your own. And this also could be aspirational. And so I think maybe we should just dive into the projection section here so we can maybe tweak this number. I have it set at $85 a month right now. And maybe it can be higher, maybe it can be lower, we'll see. Okay, so the first cell here is your monthly costs. This is the overhead plus format costs. Remember, don't change any of these. These have formulas in them. So you can see up here, it's B4 plus B9. So if I were to add another, say, $50 in format cost to this, you can see that my overhead went from $35 to $85. So I'll leave that at 0 for now, keep my format costs low. But this is showing me that I need at least $35 a month in order to be break even on this stream. All right, the next thing is your investment is what I'm calling it. This is the upfront cost plus the months to revenue times your monthly overhead. So we're basically saying if your monthly overhead were $10 a month and you think it's gonna take 6 months to achieve revenue, then this section here is gonna be $60 plus our upfront cost, which we have here. And that gets added together in the investment column. So in this case, we have a months to revenue of 6 months. We have a monthly overhead of $35. So that's gonna be 35 times 6. We can do 35 times 6 is gonna be $210 in total. And we add 210 then to our upfront cost of $750. Well, now we know that we need $960 in the bank in order to get this stream up and running. So if I were to do, I would need to make sure I have that cash. So one way to do that, and I've heard this from some streamers, is maybe if you already have an existing audience, you can put up a GoFundMe and you can set your fundraising target at $1,000, and then you know that you can cover this upfront cost plus the first 6 months before you generate revenue. And you will have enough to keep your stream up and running, and you'll have all the equipment you need to actually stream. So this number here is extremely important. This is telling you how big of an initial investment you need to make based on how long you think it's going to take for you to achieve break even. One thing to note here is it is kind of an imperfect science because we're saying the way that this formula works is we're saying that you're not generating any revenue until you're break even, and then you're generating break even revenue. Or at least your revenue target here. And that's not really how it works. The reality is you'll probably generate a little bit of revenue one month and then a little bit more the next month and a little bit more the next month. And it'll change and fluctuate. And that nuance isn't really captured in this formula, but that's okay. We've got a conservative number here. It's gonna show us a little bit higher than the reality is. And we want that because we wanna make sure that we do have a little bit of money left over so we don't run out and we have to shut down the stream. That would be suboptimal. This cost per hour number here is really just for fun to show you how much your format costs per hour of streaming. The main thing where this is going to come up is based on your data plan. I think if you're going to stream more hours, you need a more expensive data plan, and this number is going to get higher because of that overhead. Maybe you can bump down the hours, bump down to a lower data plan, and then this cost per hour would go down. You can use this to kind of optimize what your costs are per hour. Now, of course, if you have $50 of, oh, I guess I don't have that form factored into your cost per hour. So this is really just about how many hours you're streaming and your overhead here, and not your format. Okay, this one here is very important, and this is for selecting your mobile data plan. So based on my bit rate of 4,000, if I'm streaming 15 hours a month, then I need a 24.4 gigabyte data plan. This is roughly what I get on my stream at 4,000, but I think actually when I first worked out all of this, I started with a 3K bit rate. And you can see that that gets me down below 20 gigabytes. And that's great because the one data plan that I was using at the time only had 20 gigabytes of data available. And so I knew that at most I would be using about 18.3 gigabytes of data with my plan. Since then, I've added a second modem, and I've got maybe a little bit more precise number to work with. So I can stream at 4K on my current modem and 20 gigabyte plan plus another plan. And I actually do end up less than this 24.4 gigabyte estimate. So like I said, this is not an exact science, but you can use it to help you decide what kind of data plan to get. If you're right on the cusp, like in this case, it's 24.4. I know that with Cricket Wireless, I would need to spend quite a bit more per month to get like a 50 gigabyte plan instead of the 20 gigabyte plan. I might just bump this down until it's like below that, that gigabyte consumed limit. And now, boom, I can buy a cheaper data plan. All I need to do is bump my bit rate down to 3,000, and that would be something that we configure within our Bela box. So anyway, that is how the gigabytes consumed kind of works here and what it's used for. Okay, monthly profit and loss. This is your total revenue minus your overhead. This is your profit. Everything that is revenue minus overhead is profit. That's not how it is in all businesses. Sometimes you have inventory to buy or whatever, but in the case of live streaming, your only expense really is your overhead. Keeping in mind that I'm lumping your format costs into your overhead, you might want to think about it differently depending on your situation. So if my stream is generating this $85 a month target in revenue, then I have $50 left over as profit. And so you can tweak this revenue target to come up with a profit amount that you're looking for. And that profit really only matters at the beginning in amortization. And I've been using this term a lot and I haven't defined it yet. So amortization is amortization is the process of paying back your upfront costs. So in this case, we have a number here. This is how many months will it take for you to pay back the upfront costs of your stream based on how much profit you're currently earning. So in this case, we've got a upfront investment of $960 and we're generating $50 a month in profit. Well, how many months of $50 in profit will it take for us to pay back that initial $960? And it looks like 19. So we're talking, almost a year and a half in order to pay back the initial investment on your stream at $85 a month in revenue. Maybe you want to set a target in here that is more like 2 years. I don't actually know. There's 32 months, that's 2.5 years at $65. So you can just put different targets in here and see how long it takes to amortize your costs. I think that's one way to think about it, is like, how long am I willing to wait to earn the money back on my streaming rig, the initial investment that I made, and then you can set your target based on that. You can set your target based on what you think is actually plausible. For me, I actually just set my revenue target at the same amount as my overhead, and that's because I don't ever intend to amortize the upfront investment that I've made on my rig. My rig is a continually updating thing. It's alive. I'm always evolving it. It's always changing. It's always costing me more and more money. I don't expect to make any of that money back. I'm just hoping to cover my overhead with the revenues I generate from my stream. So my revenue per month target here might be $35 if I have that strategy. And you'll see that this amortization becomes never. I will literally never amortize my rig because I have $0 in profit. Let's just say that we had 70 in here. Oh, 75. Yeah, $75 a month gets us to 24 months to amortize our rig. So I'll just leave that. Okay, so that is the business model here. We've kind of worked through all the cells here, and you can fill it out with your own numbers. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk through what my example data here, so that way you can get a feel for what you can expect in revenue from your stream, and then you can use that to fill in numbers here for yourself. So first of all, let's just get a bird's eye view of what's going on. This is my actual Twitch dashboard right now. These are my actual numbers. So you can see I'm on my Bike Curious account here. This is the first 3 years of stream data for me. So January 1st to December 31st, that's all of 2019, all of 2020, and all of 2021. Keep in mind that there were pandemic lockdowns here and Twitch really blew up during that time, so we're gonna see some of that. And we're also on the revenue tab here, and we've grouped our revenue by month. If I go by week, you get like little tiny slivers for each week, and the data looks a little bit different. I find it's a little easier to look at by month at this scale. So there is the monthly data. This is all 3 years, of course. So what we want to do actually, and you can see generally here that there is an up and to the right trend. One of the things I want to emphasize is that the amount of money you make is very noisy. It's random almost. There's some months here where I have huge spikes in revenue and other months where it's just really low. And there's kind of no way to really predict that, although some of that does come from the format that you're streaming. But sometimes I'll have a really good day and I'll get a bunch of gift subs or I'll get new subscribers or whatever. And it might be a day where I don't even get a ton of followers. It might even be a day where I haven't even put a ton of work into the stream, but for some reason someone shows up and they decide that they want to buy 10 gift subs. And that will have a huge impact on the revenue numbers. So keep in mind that revenue is noisy, though it does generally, at least in my case, trend up and to the right, which is what we want to see. Okay, so let's grab a specific year. We're going to try and tell a little bit of story with the data here. So my stream actually did literally start January 1st in 2019. That was my first day live. If we go to the time streamed, you can see that I was streaming for these first 3 months here, but there is no revenue on the chart. So that's important to note. That means that it was 3 months before I generated any revenue at all. And you can see then after that, we got like $12, $9.70, $4.82 in revenue. So we're generating, under $20 a month in revenue, but then suddenly this month we generate $63. And then from then on out, we are able to pretty much cover our overhead. So at that time, my stream overhead was about $35 a month, and you can see that these 1, 2, 3, 4 months at the end of the year average out to being over $35 a month. And so it did take me until about September, it looks like, to be break even on the stream. So I guess I put 6 months into my time to be break even, and this actually is probably more like 9 months. And that, of course, changed how much money my initial investment is because I needed to cover that overhead longer. So now my initial investment is up to $1,065. So that's maybe a good target for you. You can also maybe look at your own data and make some projections there, but this is my first year. All right, let's go on to year number 2. Okay, so once again, we can kind of see that there's generally maybe an up and to the right trend here, although it really looks like this November was just huge for the stream with $198. You see here that there were a few big months. This was right when the pandemic lockdowns started, and that was really good for my stream, actually. Lots of people were watching. This month here, I made $147, so that's great. What we can do here is I can take my 853 and just divide it by 12, and so I'm making at this point an average of $71 a month. And so you might be able to go back to your business model and say like, oh, $71 a month, look at that. At that revenue, based on my $35 a month overhead, will take me about 30 months or a little under or around 2.5 years to amortize the costs of my upfront investment on my streaming rig. But of course, you know from what I already said that my goal is not to generate a profit off the stream. And so when I started generating more revenue and I felt like I had more cash flow to cover overhead, I added a second modem to my rig, and I increased the complexity of the rig. I added more overhead to the stream itself, and the end result is a better quality stream for my viewers, and my profit continued to be roughly zero. And then going into year 3, we can go and take a look at this, and we'll update some numbers again. And like, wow, look at this. You can see a much clearer up and to the right trend, especially if you exclude what happened in January. January, for some reason, was huge with $197 in revenue, probably one of my best months of all time. If I divide 1484 divided by 12, then we get $123 a month in revenue. That's pretty huge, actually. So, or 124 rounded up. So if I come in here and I do 124, that's how much revenue I was actually generating. Now, of course, at this time, my overhead is higher. Let's say that my overhead was about $75 a month. You can see that we're back to that $30 or 30 months, roughly 30 months to amortize your upfront costs. So based on the numbers that I have here, it would take me 30 months. If I had never purchased that second modem, then we would have amortized the cost of the rig in only 12 months, which I think is pretty great. But I preferred to reinvest that profit into making the viewer experience better. Okay, so let's continue onward with this. And then I guess I'll just show my follower data real quick, or let's go to the all time and we'll go to follows. You can see that it actually follows a somewhat different pattern than the revenue numbers do. Although it's the months that have really big follower spikes sometimes do correspond to big revenue spikes, like you can see this one here, but it's not always predictive. But I wanted to show my follower data just so you can get an idea of what's going on. It looks like my best month in this 3-year period, I got 562 followers. In March, April, May is like in the 300s. And then some of my worst months, like December, I take a lot of time off generally. And you can see only 50 followers in this December, only 133 followers in this December. So that's kind of how the follower data works out. Followers are not related to revenue. They're a metric you can use to gauge success, but what really matters in your business, in the business of live streaming, is how much revenue you're generating. So hopefully seeing my numbers can help you kind of set some expectations for yourself. You can go through this business model yourself and put in these 2 projections based on some of the data points that I've given you. Maybe you can reach out to friends or people you know online and ask some personal questions about how much revenue they're generating from their stream, or how long it took them to generate enough revenue to cover the overhead on their stream, or even just start generating revenue on their stream. Hopefully that gives you enough information to start to fill out your business model. And that's it. That is what we need to know in order to create a self-sustaining IRL live streaming business. And please use the business model, keep it up to date for yourself, so that way you can continue to make this a sustainable hobby for yourself. And that is all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.